Okay, if we're ready, I just want to keep it a good time so that the people online are with us and we don't lose them. So I'd like to introduce you to the second of our sessions today, which is looking at interventions to tackle plastic pollution across river catchments. And this is going to be led by Gloria Francolanci from the South East Rivers Trust. So hand it over.
Thank you. Thank you, Ewan. Thanks everyone for being here today. I'm Gloria. I work for the South East Rivers Trust, and I'll quickly walk you through all the initiatives the partnership has carried out throughout the last few years with the purpose of removing plastic pollution from the pilot catchment and reducing the impact of its legacy. Due to time constraint, I won't have the opportunity to go in depth with describing all the initiatives, so make sure you get a chance to speak with the partners during breaks, because there is a lot of good work that's being carried out. The objectives that we set ahead of the project were to remove 200 tons from the Severn pilot catchment, to assess the cost effectiveness and sustainability in the long term of each intervention, and use all the information and data we collected to produce a portfolio of each intervention and device tested. We started with testing devices that trap plastic pollution before it reaches watercourses. EPAB tested some laundry bag, and the design and delivery of making a washing machine filter to trap microfibers before they enter the washing machine wastewater system. EPAB, Best Metropole, and Saint-Bassin de l'Olorne tested also retention nets at these water stormwater outfalls, and they ensured they resourced and procured these nets from different makers to make sure we covered a wide range of conditions, so different type of mesh, hinging system, location where these nets were trialed, and they were so successful in their trial that ended up trialing more than what they initially planned. And this was due also thanks to the customized engagement strategy they used to promote their initiative, whether it was with launching events, whether it was through the usual social media campaigns, but also to targeted campaigns like La Mer Commence Ici, which helps raising awareness on littering attitude nearby storm drains. In the UK, at South East Rivers Trust, we trialed litter trapping storm drains, which trap small bits of litter in the gully before it reaches the system. And we were overall satisfied, but we thought the number of stakeholders involved in the trial made it less efficient than it would be with fewer stakeholders involved in delivery and running of the operations. Several partners, including Queen Mary University, Best Metropole, City 50, the Environment Agency, Rivers Trust, SPE, Western Country Rivers Trust, South East Rivers Trust, Plymouth City Council, and University of Plymouth, ran multiple types of cleanup events. We did engage with community groups, with volunteers from businesses, corporate, our own staff, student pupils, and sports club like canoe club and paddleboarders, to ensure again that we would be able to run in-river cleanups, as well as clean up on the beach, on estuary, and cover all different types of conditions that a river environment presents. We also, some of us, the PNMISB, La Bossea and Plymouth City Council, contracted specialists to run cleanups of areas that would be unsafe or basically impossible to run unless you have special equipment and training, such as cleanup of the seabed in the harbor, the riverbed, and areas that could only be reached by divers, sea trekkers, or by boat. Lastly, we trialed and we involved volunteers in dedicated volunteering program. This was done by Queen Mary, South East Rivers Trust, and DEA, for volunteers to be able to be equipped with equipment and training to run cleanup events on their own and collect data and feed into our system as well. We did, with the umbrella term passive collectors, we did trialed some devices that trap litter thanks to the action of the tide or the water flow. Here in the picture you see the sea bins and the waste shark. The impact that testing these devices might have on engaging with public will be picked up later on in a panel on a discussion about techno-optimism. Eventually, we trialed and tackled some very specific end-of-life plastics by designing different ways to collect them, where we thought the system might be a bit there were some flaws in the system, or where there was no system at all for certain types of plastics. We targeted plastics that are very common to find in river environments, such as agricultural plastic, angling waste, cigarette waste, whether it was just collection or recycling. We did pilot the trial and the efficiency of newly designed receptacles, whether to make them more catchy to the eyes of passers-by. We provided them where there was none, like the Baxa Mare. We provided better signage and more engaging signage to make sure that the bins these systems were used in the correct way, and the purpose of recycling and repurposing these plastics that we collected wasn't undermined by other types of waste. One of our partners, CNRS, designed and delivered on-site collection and recycling of laboratory plastic. And what's been really key of all these initiatives is that all the waste that we removed has been weighed and sorted per type. We did this using a form that was readapted by from the OSPAR grid to include all the types of litter that are commonly found in a river environment. And we've done this through citizen science activities on site with our volunteers, as well with our own staff and the contractors. Again, this will be picked up later on another panel to see it more in depth, but what's been really important of all these activities is that allowed us to collect important data on the types of litter and plastic that we've removed, and to narrow down the potential sources and pathways of plastic pollution in rivers so that we could address it at source. The main obstacle to achieving the targets that we set for ourselves was the pandemic, because its outbreak coincided with the kickoff of all the activities. So the solutions that we've tried and implement were to First of all, try and maintain consistent communication with the stakeholders as they were trying to, they had to shift their priorities towards dealing with the pandemic. Maintaining, created a working group for us to work together and meet, discuss the various obstacles and try and find common solutions together, but also provide online resources for all our audiences to tackle plastic pollution in their own time, at home, at work. And we are really proud to have removed 94 tons of plastic pollution, engaged with over 1,200 volunteers, trialed 7 different types of removal devices and in a wide range of conditions, and 17 different approaches to different types of collecting waste, and 19 different initiatives to address end-of-life plastics. And all the data we collected and a summary of what's been working for us and what's not, and our recommendation are now available on our website in the form of 4 guidance documents. Thank you very much for your attention. We will proceed now with viewing a short video from Syndicat Bassin de l'Olonne, and then I'll call some of the partners to join me here on stage, and you'll be able to ask more questions on some of the devices and initiatives using Slido. Thank you so much.
Bord de l'Elorn en compagnie du syndicat de bassin et lutte contre la pollution plastique de l'eau, de la rivière à la mer. Parmi les actions menées, en plus du ramassage des déchets, il y a désormais la pose de filets de rétention. Ils doivent capter les macro-déchets à la sortie des eaux pluviales.
Il n'est pas très esthétique, mais ô combien utile. Après quelques petits travaux, ce filet est installé sur une évacuation d'eau pluviale, ici à Sizun. Des eaux déversées dans les Lornes et qui entraînent avec elles de nombreux déchets en tout genre.
À l'intérieur du filet, il y a une nappe filtrante. L'eau de pluie sort par là. Donc elle va évidemment pouvoir traverser le filet qui est à l'intérieur, sauf les déchets. Eux vont être piégés.
Ces filets pourront retenir jusqu'à 800 kg de détritus. Ils seront vidés 5 fois par an par le syndicat de bassin de l'Elorn à l'initiative de cette installation. Objectif, analyser la provenance de ces déchets.
En amont de cet exutoire, il y a ce qu'on appelle un impluvium, un petit sous-bassin versant qui collecte via des tuyaux toutes les différentes surfaces des lotissements, des zones commerciales, industrielles, le collège par exemple, qui vont jeter leurs eaux pluviales à cet endroit. Et donc en collectant les déchets qui sortent ici, on saura ce qui est venu de toutes ces surfaces.
Le dispositif est aussi déployé plus en aval, comme ici sur les quais de Landerneau. Cette initiative s'inscrit dans le cadre d'un projet européen regroupant 18 organismes français et anglais.
On travaille par exemple aussi avec Brest Métropole, avec le département de la Manche, mais également avec l'université de Plymouth. En fait, tous les acteurs travaillent finalement sur la protection d'un réceptacle commun. Et toutes nos actions finalement se rejoignent dans leur but, qui est de limiter la pollution plastique à l'échelle de notre bassin versant, qui va déboucher ensuite dans la Manche.
La rade de Brest et la métropole sont également équipées depuis 2 semaines. Ces filets de rétention devraient rester pour un minimum de 3 ans.
Thank you. Can I please have Fanny Courik, Liz Cole, Amanda Arnold, and Teddy Dow. You can use Slido to ask questions, and thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen of the panel. Could you please introduce yourself with saying your name, your organization, and the initiatives you worked on?
Hi, my name is Amanda Arnold. I work for Queen Mary University of London. And I worked on developing a pilot for a plastic tree guard recycling scheme.
Bonjour, je suis Fanny Courik, je travaille pour l'EPAB, qui est le syndicat de bassin versant de la baie de Douarnenez. et j'étais en charge du suivi de l'action filet de rétention et aussi de la fabrication du filtre à machine à laver pour les microfibres.
Hi everyone, my name's Liz Cole and I work at Plymouth City Council and we've been involved in quite a number of the T3 activities including the community cleanups, commercial cleanups, end-of-life facilities and the passive collectors.
Bonjour tout le monde, je m'appelle Teddy Dao, je travaille au Parc naturel marin d'Iroise qui dépend de l'Office français de la biodiversité et je travaillais sur des missions d'éducation et de communication dans le cadre du projet.
Thank you very much. So the first question from the public is how, and I guess Fanny would be the best panelist to answer, how did you determine the best location for the outfall retention nets?
Oui, alors en fait on s'est beaucoup rapproché, il fallait identifier les acteurs ressources au début de notre diagnostic pour savoir où on allait placer les filets. Donc on s'est rapproché des services techniques municipaux qui ont la connaissance des réseaux d'eau pluviale. Donc eux ont pu nous indiquer les différents exutoires qui pouvaient être, sur lesquels les filets pouvaient être installés. Et aussi les services déchets et propreté qui, eux, avaient la connaissance des zones d'accumulation des déchets, des zones pertinentes où capter les déchets à cet endroit-là pouvait être intéressant.
Thank you very much. The next question, probably best addressed to Amanda. How big of an issue is contaminated waste in end-of-life facilities? So during your trial with Tree Guards, was contamination a big issue?
Yes, to some extent it was. So the problem that we faced with the tree guards was that many of them had been left in situ. So they've been left in the environment, which meant that they had collected quite a lot of soil, which is not ideal if you want to recycle those products, basically. And it also, the products were beginning to degrade quite badly in some cases because they had been left for such long periods of time sat in the environment.
Thank you. Staying with you, Amanda, sorry. How many of the passive collectors and nets will continue to be used, maintained and serviced by the local stakeholders beyond the project? And this also, I think Amanda and Teddy can answer. So do you want me to repeat the question? Is how many of the passive collectors and nets will continue to be used? So in your case, the ones that you've trialed.
So in Iroise, we installed, en Iroise, on a installé plus de 60 bacs à marée. Et donc aujourd'hui, c'est le parc marin qui a ces bacs à marée en gestion. Ils ont permis de récolter environ 12 tonnes de déchets, dont 9 tonnes étaient des déchets en plastique. Et l'idée, c'est qu'à la fin du projet, on puisse pérenniser ce réseau de bacs à marée en passant la main aux collectivités sur lesquelles sont installés ces bacs à marée. Donc on a réalisé de nombreuses réunions et ateliers de travail avec les communes et communautés de communes pour essayer de réfléchir à un plan de financement durable pour l'organisation, la collecte et l'entretien de ces équipements.
Thank you. Sorry, do you mind, because I forgot during the presentation to tell our public what the bacs à marée are? What they are, the bacs à marée.
Yeah. So les bacs à marée, ce sont des équipements, pour ceux qui n'en ont jamais vu, sont des équipements qui sont situés la plupart du temps en haute plage et qui permettent aux usagers du littoral d'y déposer les déchets qu'ils peuvent collecter durant leur activité sur la plage. Donc on parle bien de déchets échoués, on ne parle pas de déchets personnels. Ces bacs à marée, ce sont des outils qui sont très intéressants parce qu'ils permettent d'un côté de sensibiliser le public à la problématique des macro-déchets échoués sur le littoral et ils permettent aussi de les engager dans la collecte de ces déchets à travers une démarche éco-citoyenne. Ils permettent aussi d'accumuler de la donnée. Les déchets qui sont déposés dans ces bacs sont ensuite triés et quantifiés et ils permettent d'accumuler de la donnée qui nous donne une meilleure compréhension de la pollution plastique sur nos plages.
Thank you. And one last question on this. Does the wider public use the bacs-à-marée correctly?
Eh bien, c'est tout un travail justement. On s'est rendu compte que les bacs à marée, ils étaient souvent pas bien utilisés par le public. Donc on a eu tout un travail de communication. On a créé des visuels installés sur les bacs à marée pour essayer d'inciter les gens à bien les utiliser. Et ce qu'on recommande aux collectivités, ça va être de les garder toute l'année, mais de les enlever à la période estivale, là où il y a un fort afflux touristique, pour éviter justement cette mauvaise utilisation de la part du public.
Thank you. Fanny, how effective have the different measures been to prevent plastic arriving at rivers, particularly washing machine filters and nets?
Pour les filets, ça a été efficace dans le sens où on a pu, par exemple en baie de Douarnenez, on a pu collecter plus de 6500 déchets plastiques sur 4 levées de filets. Après, on se rend compte qu'il y a des endroits où les filets sont plus efficaces que d'autres. Ce qui était très efficace aussi, c'est la communication qu'on a pu faire autour des filets, parce que les gens ne sont pas forcément au courant du cheminement que prend la pollution plastique à travers les réseaux d'eau pluviale, à travers le ruissellement des eaux pluviales qui va dans les avaloirs, qui va ensuite, qui rejoint l'environnement, et c'est une façon aussi de montrer qu'un déchet dans la rue va forcément se retrouver dans l'environnement à un moment ou à un autre. Donc c'était important de ce point de vue-là. Et sinon pour les filtres, on a un prestataire qui a fabriqué un prototype de filtre qu'on peut faire soi-même et à mettre en sortie de machine à laver. Et en fait, pour l'instant, on sait que ça arrête les fibres au-dessus de 50 microns. Et nous, on a organisé des ateliers avec du public pour fabriquer ce genre de filtre. Mais il n'est pas encore diffusé à grande échelle, donc il n'y a pas vraiment de résultats, de chiffres.
Thank you. And staying on the topics of nets, I'll put some questions together. So the public is asking, are the nets reusable? How do you manage organic waste that is trapped in the nets? And whether you have a way to measure what's left. So, for example, all the waste that but this is probably for all the panelists. So, throughout all the activities that we have run, we have been able to weigh and measure the amount of waste that we diverted. Do you know? Did you manage to quantify roughly how much could be potentially left there?
So for one of our interventions where we use commercial divers to remove angling line from the seabed, we managed to collect 2,073 kilometres of angling line over 8 different dives, which is kind of a significant amount. So that's been a really positive engagement.
Thank you. Sorry, the question about the nets was how do you manage the organic waste and whether the nets are going to be reused beyond the end of the project?
Les filets qu'on a installés, il y en a un qui va rester au même endroit, un autre qui n'est pas très efficace parce que justement on récupérait beaucoup de matière organique et peu de déchets. Donc celui-là va soit être enlevé, soit être déplacé sur un autre exutoire. Et au niveau de la matière organique, c'est un des soucis qu'on a eu au cours du projet, c'est qu'en amont d'installer un filet, il faut réfléchir d'abord à qu'est-ce qu'on va faire, est-ce qu'il y a une filière d'évacuation et de traitement des déchets. Et donc là, c'est les communes qui s'en sont chargées, mais je sais que les partenaires ont eu aussi des soucis là-dessus parce qu'il y a beaucoup de matière organique. Et donc on ne peut pas recycler, c'est mélangé à des déchets, donc c'est pas recyclable et il faut trouver une filière de traitement ensuite. Et ça, il faut le réfléchir en amont de l'installation d'un filet.
Thank you. Did any of the nets become full before they were scheduled to be emptied? And if so, did it cause any blockage or problems like flooding?
Je sais pas pour les autres partenaires, mais nous, en fait, on faisait une veille et on n'avait pas de... Comme c'est les services techniques qui s'occupaient de la maintenance du filet, on n'avait pas d'agenda avec des dates, donc c'était... S'il était plein, on le vidait, quoi.
Thank you. I remember, and I'm hopefully saying this correctly, Santa Herbassan de Lelorgne had to move one of their nets because it caused some flooding, but nothing that caused the head. I mean, yes, it had an impact, but nothing. It wasn't a threat. It was moved, and all went well afterwards. But please feel free to ask Stephanie during the breaks. Liz, what were the strengths and the weaknesses of the trial you did with waste sharks? And do you want to quickly explain to the public what waste sharks were?
Yeah, so the waste sharks were two remote control devices that we purchased for the project to check how we could remove macroplastic from harbours. So we used them mostly in sort of calm, still waters, and remote controlled them by people were required to remote control them, whereas the sea bins, which were a comparable plastic collector, were left to sit in the harbours by themselves. Generally, both types of devices were effective in removing different sized particles of plastics, but there were several sort of reasons why we had some challenges. The waste sharks needed to have quite a lot of manpower to get them into the water and to get them out again, which meant they were quite labour intensive. And there were sort of some issues with collecting quite a lot of seaweed and some of the vegetation getting wrapped around the thrusters, which meant sometimes that the driving of them was slightly haphazard. But generally, the waste sharks in particular were very useful for removing quite large plastic items, bottles, crisp packets, that kind of thing, and were effective for that. The sea bins removed smaller amounts of plastic particles and did have some issues with collecting sea creatures as well. So that was a bit of a challenge that then needs to be addressed.
Did you notice whether the sea bins were used by boaters or passers-by to dispose of the litter on the go?
No, I don't think so. The sea bin was sort of within a harbour and sort of not really in an accessible place, so I don't think it was used by general public.
And people living in the marina, or
Possibly,
no?
but I don't think that was something that was particularly monitored.
Okay, that's great. Good news. Thank you. What was the most prevalent type of plastic collected in the nets? Did you collect sewage-derived waste such as wet wipes as well? Fanny?
Nous, ce qu'on a retrouvé le plus, je parle juste pour les PAB, parce que les autres partenaires, ça peut être différent. On a retrouvé, la moitié des déchets qu'on a retrouvés, c'était des mégots. Donc c'est le déchet qu'on a retrouvé le plus. Et autrement, beaucoup d'emballages alimentaires. Donc c'était pas le type de déchet qui a été dans la question, je crois.
If you collected a lot of wet wipes or other things that were most likely coming from sewage?
Non.
Okay.
Non, c'est vraiment les eaux pluviales et pas les eaux d'assainissement.
Okay, thank you. Amanda, question for you. Why target the recycling of tree guards, and was the pilot effective?
I think the reason it was worth doing, like targeting plastic tree guards, was because there is going to be increasing tree planting occurring not just now, but also in the future. There's targets within the UK for 30,000 hectares of new trees to be planted per year. And the use of tree guards will probably continue within that period of time, although other alternatives are being explored. There are also other reasons as well, because landowners and farmers, for example, don't necessarily understand where they can dispose of tree guards. They may not understand that they could be developed into new materials once they're recycled and turned into new products. And also as well, there's not necessarily the recycling facilities locally available, so that can be a bit of a problem. And then from the point of view of a waste contractor, the waste contractors see tree guards, they're bulky, they're very lightweight, and it makes them pretty not something that's particularly palatable as a thing to collect and recycle, because unless they're available in very large quantities. So these were sort of the reasons why we wanted to set up a pilot scheme to see if we could try and accumulate tree guards at a scale that were relevant for the waste contractors, but also solve the problems that maybe landowners and farmers were facing as well in terms of recycling. So in terms of how effective it was a bit mixed. We had 12 expressions of interest, and 6 of those people or participants ended up delivering tree guards. And when we got them to sign up to this, we asked them to basically estimate the number of tree guards that they would deliver so that we could manage the collection on the day, so that we didn't get overwhelmed by it, basically. And what we found was that they initially said that they would be bringing a lot less tree guards than they actually did. So actually on the day we ended up with far more tree guards than we were expecting, and in greater concentrations from the areas of land than we had anticipated. So I think one of the things that made us kind of realize was that you kind of need, and we also managed to, we did actually remove, I think, 1.2 tons in the end of tree guards. So, and I think about 700 tree guards were actually reused by other landowners as well. But yeah, the actual effectiveness of it, I think, could be increased by running it on a regular basis. And so that would be yearly, ensuring that you have like local hubs for that kind of thing. And also the other aspect as well would be to ensure that you've got people involved in tree planting that are doing it at a large scale, because otherwise you're not going to get enough tree guards to make it effective or for a waste contractor to come and collect.
Thank you. And there was a question about alternatives to plastic tree guards. Are there any alternatives? Yes. Are there any alternatives to protect saplings at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, there are a range of different methods, you know, or there's not just tree guards that you can use. The tree guards can also, you can get tree guards in different materials, some of which claim to be biodegradable. There are others which are made out of sheep wool fiber, and also others that may be made out of cardboard. But none of these are particularly tested, some of the alternatives. And so I think that there are potential problems with some of the alternatives as well, because they haven't been widely tested. So, and then there's also alternative ways in which you could protect trees, planting at high densities, for example, to try and overcome the amount of damage that might be caused by herbivores. But then you might also want to think about planting unpalatable species that could protect your trees that you want to basically promote the growth of, or thorny varieties that are not palatable as well, and that create protection.
Thank you. No, I think also one thing we discussed recently was the fact that none of these trials has been large scale yet. So recycling seems, at least in the short and medium term, something necessary until alternative materials have been trialed on a larger scale and can become more accessible, and there is more data on their efficiency. Okay, thank you. This is addressed, open question for the panel. In your opinion, which intervention proved to be the most effective at removing both macro and micro plastics?
I think you've got to look at removing large items of plastic, because I think once something becomes a microplastic, the mechanical measures in place to do that could be potentially so damaging in environmental context that you and also as well, like just the amount of effort that would require. So I think making sure that macroplastics aren't allowed to sit in the environment in whatever capacity for any length of time to break down into microplastics should surely be the main target, is trying to stop that from happening in the first place before they become microplastics, try and get them out of the environment. But I don't know what you guys think. Yeah.
I think the majority of the ones that we trialled were for macroplastics rather than micro.
Yes, I think so as well. I think that we didn't have a specific device that was able to capture both, or we didn't capture data on both. Thank you. And question for Teddy. How to manage an effective recycling scheme program for end-of-life leisure boats to limit cost of plastic pollution?
En France, les bateaux en fin de vie sont pris en charge par un éco-organisme agréé par l'État qui s'appelle l'APER, pour Association pour une plaisance éco-responsable. Donc c'est cet éco-organisme en fait qui prend en charge les bateaux. Il prend en charge la totalité des coûts de déconstruction des navires et reste à la charge des propriétaires leur transport jusqu'à un centre de déconstruction agréé. Nous en Iroise, on a un enjeu un peu particulier qui est qu'on a la présence d'îles sur lesquelles on va avoir beaucoup de bateaux qui sont abandonnés dans les ports et sur le littoral. Et en fait, en raison des enjeux, des contraintes économiques et logistiques, c'est souvent difficile de prendre en charge ces navires. Du coup, grâce au projet PPP, le parc a pu s'engager et accompagner les collectivités et les propriétaires de bateaux en fin de vie sur les îles pour faciliter la demande de prise en charge auprès de l'APER et pour financer à 100% le transport des bateaux vers le continent. Du coup, dans notre cas, c'est 55 bateaux qui ont été pris en charge des îles de Ouessant, Molène et Saint qui ont été rapatriés sur le continent. Et ça a représenté environ 25 tonnes de déchets, dont donc 19 tonnes de matériaux plastiques. Cette action, elle a permis en fait, après d'amorcer une démarche de prise en charge des bateaux à l'échelle de l'Iroise. Et ça a donné des outils aux gestionnaires de port aussi et aux collectivités pour qu'elles puissent s'emparer de cette problématique sur un plus long terme.
Thank you very much. Question for Fanny. Have you managed to recover any of the nets, and how was this done? I guess this question means how was the empty and categorizing of the waste run?
Alors, ça a été réalisé par moi et ma collègue, les caractérisations, et du coup, ça nous prenait à peu près une journée pour caractériser chaque filet. Mais je sais que pour les Lorne et Brest Métropole, les quantités étaient beaucoup plus importantes dans les filets et que ça a été fait en externe et que c'était assez compliqué. Au début, on triait tout, mais ça prenait trop de temps, donc on a fait par échantillon après. C'était la question?
Oh.
Was
Yeah,
it-
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, correct. Thank you. Question open to everyone. Regarding retention nets, but I guess all the devices and the various initiatives that we have run, was there a specific, like the volume of plastic collected was affected by a season? Whether it was, I don't know, higher footfall on the locations we tested our devices or increased rainfall. So how do you think seasonality or season specific affected, like increased the volume of plastic that we removed?
I think for the waste sharks, it wasn't so much a seasonality thing as it was the weather and the tides, which affected how the amounts of waste would come into the harbours so that we could then collect that. And that caused a bit of a challenge for us to then be able to combine our trials at the same time as the variations of the weather and the tide to get a wide spread of the plastic that could be collected.
Anyone else?
Pour les filets, on ne peut pas dire que c'est la saisonnalité, en tout cas parce qu'on n'a pas pu forcément lever les filets au même moment, donc on n'a pas forcément les mêmes données d'une année à l'autre. Mais oui, la pluie, forcément, quand il y a beaucoup de pluviométrie, il y a plus de déchets dans les filets.
And what about the bacs à marée?
Nous, pour les bacs à marée, la saisonnalité, elle est surtout due au fait, comme je vous l'ai expliqué tout à l'heure, qu'on préconise d'enlever les bacs à marée en période estivale. Par contre, durant la période hivernale, ce qu'on constate, c'est que les bacs à marée sont plus vite remplis lorsqu'il va y avoir des épisodes de tempête ou des phénomènes de grande marée. Plus de déchets qui sont échoués sur les plages et donc plus de déchets déposés dans les bacs.
Thank you. There's a question for you, Teddy. Were the boats that you collected, were they repaired, recycled, sent to landfill, incinerator, and what are the options for organizations that exist but are not specialists in the sector? So what happened to the boats that you collected?
Les bateaux du coup qu'on a collectés, ils ont été pris en charge par l'APER qui s'est chargé de la déconstruction et donc ils sont déconstruits, triés par type de composants et après ils essaient de valoriser au maximum, mais il me semble que pour le moment c'est principalement de la valorisation énergétique qui est faite à partir des bateaux.
Thank you. And open question to everyone. When you came to engaging with landowners to run a trial, what issues have you faced?
Yeah, just I think with our passive collectors, with the waste sharks, we engaged with 3 different marinas. So we worked with 3 different harbour masters with different sort of marine industries that are within those harbours, and that allowed us to gain some storage for our waste shark, which was important. Also to help with sort of some of the sort of small maintenance issues, which was really good. But what it did do was that it allowed us to build a rapport and a relationship within those marinas to give validity and support for the trials. And I think if you get that support from the marine groups themselves, then the activities are better received.
Thank you. Anyone else?
We worked with the Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group. They actually asked us to partner on this tree guard recycling scheme, and that was a really important step in the process to be able to basically get access and engage with a network, a pre-established network of people so that were engaged in tree planting. And I think it would have been quite tricky if we had done that from scratch on our own. So I think looking at ways in which you can work with organisations that are already working in that capacity can be really helpful.
Thank you. As I mentioned in the presentation earlier, stakeholders engagement has been like a key part of the preparatory work that we have done to make sure that we could hit the ground running as soon as the restrictions were lifted. So yeah, it's something we've worked on. It necessarily didn't work as well as we wanted. Some of the things we wanted to trial we couldn't, but we still were able to work with them in finding alternative solutions that worked for both of us, all parties, to get to the purpose of the testing and piloting initiatives that we wanted to do. The very last question, do you consider using booms in a river to collect litter? We did, but most of the pilot catchments were subject to navigation, so there weren't many locations where we could trial the booms, although it would have been the perfect opportunity since we had the funding to do it. And also, some of the catchment were high risk of flooding, and therefore it was, despite the good intention of all parties involved, it was really hard to obtain a licensing permit. So I would like to thank all of our panelists and everyone for your questions. The ones that haven't been answered will be answered via email. Thank you so much.
So thank you to Gloria and the panel there. This has been a very large and wide-ranging project. So although we've been able to show you some examples, there are other details of things that have been going on in the project around the room. And we're now going to break for lunch. I strongly encourage you to have a look around, but also to talk to the people that have been involved in the project, and they can give you more information about the different works that have been undertaken. So now we're going to move for lunch, which will be at the back of the room for the people in the room. You have to sort yourself out online, unfortunately. And yeah, take the time to look around and to talk to people whilst you're here, but also take the time to get a breath of fresh air if you need it, so that we come back refreshed this afternoon at 10 to 2. So thank you very much for this morning to everybody and to you for listening. Thank you.